Hi guy, tonight we journey back to the desert encampment of the Basari nomads at the edge of the Achaemenid Empire. Picture it. Sand stretching as far as the eye can see, painted in hues of orange and deep violet as the sun dips below the horizon. The air, usually shimmering with heat, now carries a cool evening breeze, whispering secrets of ancient empires and forgotten battles. You trudge alongside a scout named Darius, no relation to the king, sadly, as he patrols the mountain passes overlooking the ancient trade routes to Egypt. Imagine the crunch of sand and gravel beneath your sandals, the rhythmic thud of Darius's worn leather boots setting the pace. He's a wiry figure, weathered by sun and wind, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon, alert for any sign of trouble. He's got this interesting aroma about him, a mix of sweat, dust, and something faintly reptilian. We'll get to that. The year is 525 BCE, and the air crackles with a tension thicker than Darius's crocodile dung sunscreen. Trust me, you'll learn more about that soon. It's a strange concoction, this sunscreen. Apparently, the crocodiles of the Nile, their hides perpetually bathed in the sun, hold the secret to avoiding sunburn. Darius swears by it. You, on the other hand, might want to keep a respectful distance. It's potent stuff. And speaking of potent, the political climate. Let's just say things are about to get messy. You probably won't survive this. Historically speaking, that is. Statistically, the chances of you, a time-traveling listener, perishing in 525 BCE are remarkably low. Unless you have some pre-existing time travel paradox you haven't told me about. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm not twisting your arm, just gently nudging your mouse-clicking finger. And don't forget to let me know in the comments where in the world you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. I love hearing from you all. It's like a virtual campfire circle of history buffs. Someone listening from Tokyo, someone from Reykjavik, someone from, well, you get the picture. It's a global party, and everyone's invited. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine yourself there, beside Darius, feeling the desert wind on your face, the vastness of the landscape stretching out before you. Close your eyes for a moment and breathe in the scent of, well, maybe not the crocodile dung, just the desert air. Darius spits a perfect arc catching the dying sunlight, and mutters about omens, vultures circling too close to the setting sun. He sees it as a bad sign, a foreshadowing of dark times ahead. These birds, these scavengers of the sky, are they simply drawn to the carcasses of desert creatures, or are they harbingers of war, their presence a grim prophecy of the bloodshed to come? Historians still argue whether vultures actually had political opinions back then. I mean, did they actively choose to circle battlefields in anticipation of a good meal, or were they just hungry? It's a complex question. Probably. Let's be honest, vultures probably weren't reading political pamphlets, but their presence, their undeniable association with death and decay, certainly added to the ominous atmosphere. Fact: the Achaemenids, under Cambyses II, were poised to invade Egypt. This isn't speculation, this is historical record. Cambyses, ambitious and ruthless, had his sights set on expanding his already vast empire. Egypt, with its wealth and resources, was a tempting prize. He was amassing his troops, preparing for a campaign that would change the course of history. Quirky fact: Achaemenid scouts often used trained falcons for aerial reconnaissance. Not vultures, sorry Darius. Falcons, swift and keen-eyed, provided valuable intelligence, soaring high above enemy lines to relay information back to their handlers. Imagine the sight of these magnificent birds, their silhouettes against the desert sky, carrying vital messages on their feathered backs. It's a far cry from our modern-day drones, but equally effective in its time. Debate: did Darius actually call those vultures flying tax collectors? More research needed. This is where things get a little hazy. We have some fragmented accounts, some whispers passed down through the ages, but no definitive proof. Did Darius, in a moment of dark humor, compare the circling vultures to the tax collectors of the empire, both preying on the vulnerable? It's a compelling image, a darkly humorous analogy, but is it historically accurate? Yawn. Almost bedtime, right? Well, for some of you, perhaps. But for us, our journey has just begun. We've only scratched the surface of this fascinating period in history. There are still so many stories to tell, so many secrets to uncover. So stay tuned, because next time, we delve deeper into the world of the Achaemenids, exploring their customs, their beliefs, and the events that led to their fateful clash with the Egyptians. And maybe, just maybe, we'll finally get to the bottom of that crocodile dung sunscreen. You huddle deeper into your worn camel hair cloak, the desert wind whipping around you like a playful djinn. Sand stings your eyes, grits between your teeth, and finds its way into places sand has no business being. I swear, if I find another grain in my... well, let's just say it's an uncomfortable situation. Think of it as nature's exfoliating spa treatment, Darius says, his voice barely audible above the wind's howl. He claps a hand on my shoulder, nearly dislodging me from my precarious perch on this wind-scoured rock. Invigorating, isn't it? This guy. Always the optimist, even when we're facing down a sandstorm that could bury us alive and leave us looking like desiccated dates. Invigorating as a hot bath and a date-stuffed pastry, I mutter, pulling my cloak tighter. This is just... sandy. Darius chuckles, a low rumble that's almost swallowed by the wind. He gestures vaguely towards the south, a direction currently obscured by a swirling wall of beige. Besides, a little sand is the least of our worries. Have you heard the rumors coming out of the south? I squint, trying to see past the storm, but it's like staring into a tan-colored abyss. Rumors? Over the sound of this miniature apocalypse? I can barely hear myself think. They say armies are massing, Darius says, his voice taking on a serious tone. Persian armies, led by Cambyses himself. The name hangs in the air, heavy as the sand-laden wind. Cambyses, the king of kings. A man whose ambition stretched further than the vast deserts we now found ourselves in. Persian armies? I repeat, the implications sinking in. Here? What are they doing this far south? Egypt, Darius replies simply. They're going after Egypt. My eyes widen. Egypt, the land of pharaohs and pyramids, of untold riches and ancient mysteries, and now, apparently, the target of Persian aggression. The whispers started weeks ago, Darius continues, settling down beside me, seemingly unfazed by the abrasive gusts. Garbled stories carried by traders and travelers. They speak of Persian soldiers, thousands of them, marching across the desert like a swarm of locusts. And the Egyptians? I ask, picturing the elaborate headdresses and gilded chariots of the pharaohs. What are they doing? Darius shrugs. Trembling, mostly. Pharaoh Psamtik III is young, inexperienced. Some say he's more concerned with the quality of his eyeliner than the impending invasion. I snort. Priorities, people. Even in the face of annihilation, a good cat-eye is essential. Darius grins. Apparently. Though I did hear one rumor, a rather peculiar one. He leans closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. There's a shortage of decent eyeliner in the south. The Persians, it seems, are hoarding it all. I stare at him, momentarily speechless. They're hoarding eyeliner? He nods, a mischievous glint in his eye. Imagine the chaos. An army of impeccably lined Persian soldiers facing off against a horde of smudge-eyed Egyptians. It could be the deciding factor in the war. I shake my head, a mixture of amusement and disbelief swirling within me. This whole situation was becoming increasingly surreal. Persian armies, Egyptian pharaohs, and now eyeliner espionage. But behind the absurdity lay a chilling truth. War was coming, and it was coming fast. Cambyses' ambition is well known, I say, my thoughts turning more serious. He craves power, land, wealth. Egypt, with its fertile Nile and lucrative trade routes, is a prize he's long coveted. Exactly, Darius agrees. Controlling the trade routes would give Persia unprecedented access to resources and markets. It's a strategic move, cloaked in, well, maybe not eyeliner, but certainly in political maneuvering. But there's another story, he adds, his voice lowering again. A more unusual one. I raise an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh, do tell. Some of the desert nomads, he explains, believe that dreams can predict the future. I nod slowly. I've heard of such things. Prophetic visions, glimpses into the tapestry of fate. Darius gives me a sideways glance. I had one last night, a rather vivid one. And? I prompt, sensing the punchline approaching. I opened a bed and breakfast, he deadpans, with complimentary camel rides and all-you-can-eat dates. I burst out laughing, the sound momentarily overpowering the wind's roar. A bed and breakfast? Really? That's your prophetic vision? He shrugs, grinning. Hey, don't judge. It was a very successful B&B. 5-star reviews all around. After a moment, the laughter subsides, leaving a strange quiet between us. The wind still howls, the sand still stings, but the absurdity of Darius's dream has momentarily broken the tension. Seriously, though, I say, returning to the topic at hand. These nomadic prophecies, do they have anything to say about Cambyses and his invasion? Darius's expression turns thoughtful. There's a story circulating, a rumor. Some say that Cambyses himself had a dream that supposedly inspired him to invade Egypt. A dream? I repeat, intrigued. What kind of dream? The details are sketchy, Darius admits. No one seems to know exactly what he dreamt, but some whisper that it involved a threat to his throne, a challenge from the pharaohs. Others claim he dreamt of unimaginable riches hidden within the Egyptian tombs. Did he dream of a B&B, I ask, unable to resist the urge to tease him. He rolls his eyes, but a smile plays on his lips. Doubtful, though I wouldn't be surprised if complimentary dates were involved. So, I say, turning serious again, do you believe it? Do you think a dream could really have sparked this whole invasion? Darius shrugs. Who knows? Dreams are strange things. They can be whispers from the gods, echoes of the future, or just indigestion. It's hard to say. He pauses, looking out at the swirling sand. But whether it was a dream, political ambition, or a desire to corner the eyeliner market, one thing is certain. War is coming, and we're right in its path. The gritty texture between my teeth confirmed it. Sand. Definitely sand. I chewed thoughtfully, trying to discern any hint of gazelle amidst the overwhelming flavor of, well, I wasn't sure. Darius, bless his optimistic heart, swore up and down it was gazelle jerky he'd bartered for back in Persepolis. My palate, however, leaned towards something closer to a well-worn boot, left out in the desert sun for a few decades. The meager handful of dried dates offered little respite, their sweetness swallowed by the pervasive dryness. Adds a certain crunch, doesn't it? Darius grinned, seemingly oblivious to my internal struggle. He tore off another strip of the questionable jerky with gusto. I managed a weak smile, choosing to focus on the crackling flames of our small fire rather than the culinary abomination I was attempting to digest. The desert provides, he declared, gesturing grandly with the jerky. You just have to know where to look. He winked, and I couldn't help but chuckle. His unwavering optimism, even in the face of such unique cuisine, was infectious. Darius explained how a lifetime spent traversing these arid lands had honed his ability to find sustenance where others saw only desolation. He pointed out the subtle tracks in the sand, the barely perceptible shift in the wind, the almost invisible changes in the color of the sparse vegetation. Each detail, he explained, held a clue to the hidden resources of the desert, from a rare patch of edible plants to a concealed water source. Apparently, this philosophy extended to his culinary choices as well, although in this case I wasn't entirely convinced. As the last rays of sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sand dunes in shades of fiery orange and deep violet, a figure emerged from the gathering twilight. Tall and wiry, with a long white beard that reached his chest and eyes that twinkled with an ancient wisdom, he approached our fireside circle. This, Darius informed me with a respectful nod, was Zarathustra, an elder of his tribe. Zarathustra settled gracefully beside us, his presence immediately adding a sense of gravitas to the scene. Without prompting, he began to speak, his voice a low rumble that resonated with the surrounding stillness. He spoke of ancient Persian kings, of Cyrus the Great and his vast empire, of Darius I and his conquests, of Xerxes and his mighty armies. He wove the narrative like a magic carpet, transporting us back in time to an era of legendary battles and imperial grandeur. His words painted vivid pictures of bustling cities and opulent palaces, of camel caravans laden with silks and spices traversing the royal road, of fierce warriors clashing on the battlefield. He spoke of the intricate network of communication that held the vast Achaemenid empire together, a network in which nomadic tribes like the Basari played a crucial role, acting as messengers and guides across the vast expanse of the empire. As he spoke, I recalled something I had read about the history of the region. Nomadic tribes weren't just messengers, they were often highly skilled in other areas as well. Many were adept herbalists, possessing a deep knowledge of the medicinal properties of desert plants. This fact suddenly became very relevant as Zarathustra reached into a small pouch and produced a handful of dried leaves. With a knowing smile, he proceeded to brew a steaming pot of tea over the fire. "This," he declared, presenting me with a small clay cup filled with the fragrant brew, "is a special blend, guaranteed to cure even the most persistent of snores." Darius, without a word, immediately requested 3 cups. I took a tentative sip. The tea had a strange, almost earthy flavor, with a slightly sour undertone. It was unlike anything I'd ever tasted before. While I couldn't vouch for its anti-snoring properties, it was certainly interesting. Later, as I lay wrapped in my blanket staring up at the star-studded desert sky, I pondered the enigmatic brew. The flavor lingered, a strange mixture of sweet, sour, and something else. It was then that Darius, nestled beside the fire, let out a small chuckle. "You know," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "there's a rumor going around that Zarathustra's special tea isn't exactly herbal." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. I turned to look at him, a question forming in my mind. "Some say," he continued, a mischievous glint in his eye, "that it's actually fermented camel milk." I stared at him, speechless. Fermented camel milk? The thought was both revolting and strangely intriguing. Could that explain the unusual flavor, the slightly sour aftertaste? Darius simply shrugged, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "The jury's still out," he said, his voice thick with sleepiness. "Or passed out." He let out a soft snore, the sound quickly swallowed by the vast silence of the desert night. I, however, remained awake, pondering the mystery of Zarathustra's tea, the image of fermented camel milk swirling in my mind. The desert, it seemed, was full of surprises, both culinary and otherwise. "So this pass," Darius says, sweeping his hand across the vista, "funnels anyone trying to get through the mountains into this little bottleneck." He taps a finger on a point in the sand he's using as a makeshift map. "Natural choke point, strategically vital, and," he leans in conspiratorially, "amazing Wi-Fi. Don't tell anyone." I stare at him. "Wi-Fi?" He winks. "Just kidding. Though I'm sure if someone invented it back then, this would be the place to get it. Perfect signal strength." He pats the rocky ground, solid foundation. He ambles over to a section of rock face covered in carvings. "See these? Graffiti from some of the previous conquerors who came through here? Menace was here. Thutmose conquered this joint. Same impulse as those Kilroy was here things, just with more chariots and less mustaches." He traces a particularly elaborate carving depicting a battle scene. "This one's my favorite. Lots of action, good composition, 4 stars. He gestures back towards the pass. "My job essentially is to sit here and watch for any sign of Egyptian reinforcements coming through, like some ancient neighborhood watch volunteer. Except instead of reporting suspicious activity to the HOA, I report it to, well, the king. Slightly higher stakes." He picks up a smooth, flat stone and skips it across the sand. "Scouts were pretty important back then, you know. Vital for gathering intel, keeping communication lines open. You know, the usual cloak and dagger stuff. Plus, some of us were trained to mimic animal calls." He puffs up his chest and lets out a series of strange chirps and whistles. A sand grouse flutters by, glances at him with an unimpressed look, and continues on its way. Darius shrugs. "Works better on pigeons." He falls silent for a moment, staring out at the desert. "You know," he says thoughtfully, "sometimes I think I'm the only thing stopping this whole place from becoming a historical footnote. Me and my keen eyesight. And my rock-solid understanding of desert topography." He grins. "Seriously, though, intelligence gathering was a big deal. If we didn't know what the enemy was up to, we'd be caught with our togas down. Or whatever we wore under our armor. Probably linen shorts. It gets hot." He picks up a handful of sand and lets it trickle through his fingers. "I'm telling you, it's fascinating stuff. The history, the strategy, the sheer amount of sand." He trails off, looking around with a sudden air of purpose. Now, over there, you'll see the remnants of an old watering hole, crucial for any army on the move. And if you tip me a few shekels, I can tell you about the time a camel got stuck in it. Hilarious story. He catches my raised eyebrow. What? It's educational! And slightly lucrative. Hey, a scout's gotta eat, right? Plus, the historical record doesn't mention my salary. Or my benefits package. Or my 401k. Which, let's be honest, is probably non-existent. He pauses again, his expression turning serious once more. There's still a lot historians don't know about scouts. Like, did we have side hustles? Did we moonlight as desert tour guides? Were we expected to provide snacks for the king? These are the burning questions of our time. He picks up another stone and throws it further this time, watching it arc through the air. I mean, think about it. You're stuck out here in the middle of nowhere, waiting for something to happen. You've got all this knowledge about the local flora and fauna, the hidden paths, the best places to find shade. It's a waste not to share. And maybe make a little extra denarii on the side. He shrugs. Who knows? Maybe I was the first desert tour guide, leading wealthy merchants across the sands, pointing out the scenic overlooks, telling them thrilling tales of conquest and camel-related mishaps. It's a theory. He grins at me again, that same mischievous glint in his eyes. Of course, proving it is another matter entirely. The historical record is, let's just say it's not exactly comprehensive on the subject of scout side hustles. They were more concerned with who won which battle, not who gave the best camel riding lessons. He sighs dramatically. Lost to the sands of time, I suppose. Along with my commission checks. He claps his hands together. Anyway, enough about my hypothetical entrepreneurial ventures. Back to the important stuff. See that ridge over there? Perfect vantage point for spotting enemy movements. And, he lowers his voice again, decent cell service. Don't tell anyone. He winks again. Just kidding. Mostly. Zarathustra's voice, a low rumble like distant thunder, pulls me back from the swirling chaos of the cosmos. He paints a picture of Egypt, a land shimmering under a relentless sun. He speaks of pharaohs adorned with so much gold they practically shimmer, of temples that pierce the heavens, their towering obelisks casting long, dramatic shadows across the desert sands. He describes the Nile, a life-giving serpent winding through the land, its annual floods leaving behind more than just fertile silt like, the occasional basking crocodile, just casually sunning themselves amongst the papyrus reeds. Try explaining that to your insurance adjuster. I stare up at the night sky, the infinite expanse of glittering stars, each a distant sun, each potentially harboring worlds beyond our comprehension. I try to grasp the sheer scale of this land Darius calls the breadbasket of the world, which, incidentally, makes me wonder if they had desert food trucks back then. I mean, picture it. A camel pulling a cart laden with dates, figs, and, well, probably not shawarma. But still, desert food trucks. Genius. While you're busy conjuring visions of Egyptian banquets, Darius's voice cuts through my reverie, tinged with gentle sarcasm. Perhaps you might consider how we're going to fill our frigid, rather insistent stomachs. He has a point. My stomach chooses this precise moment to growl in emphatic agreement, a low rumble that echoes Zarathustra's earlier description of the Nile, except less life-giving, more demanding of sustenance. Egypt, Zarathustra continues, oblivious to our rumbling stomachs, was a land of unimaginable wealth, its granaries overflowing, its people skilled in the arts of agriculture and other things. Other things? I ask, intrigued. Oh, Darius says with a mischievous glint in his eye. Like inventing breath mints. I raise an eyebrow. Breath mints? In ancient Egypt? Indeed, Darius confirms, his grin widening. Made from, he pauses for dramatic effect, crocodile dung. No. Yes. Darius. N-O. I can't even. The mental image is vivid and decidedly unminty. It's true, he insists. Look it up sometime. Though I wouldn't necessarily recommend sampling any ancient Egyptian breath fresheners. I shudder. I think I'll stick with my 21st century gum, thank you very much. Though I have to admit, it's a fascinating, if slightly nauseating tidbit. It speaks volumes about the ingenuity, if not the taste, of the ancient Egyptians. Zarathustra, bless his heart, seems completely unaware of our sidebar conversation about crocodile dung-flavored breath mints. He's back to describing the grandeur of the pharaohs, their opulent palaces, and the intricate hieroglyphs that adorn every surface. He talks about the vast irrigation systems they developed, their intricate understanding of the Nile's ebb and flow, which allowed them to cultivate crops with remarkable efficiency. It truly was, as Darius said, the breadbasket of the world, able to feed its own vast population and likely trade with surrounding regions. Which brings me back to my earlier musings. So about those desert food trucks, Darius sighs. You're obsessed. I'm just curious, I defend myself. I mean, they had camels. They had food. It seems like a logical next step. Did they deliver? By camel? I have absolutely no idea, Darius says, throwing his hands up in exasperation. And frankly, I don't think Zarathustra does either. He seems a bit preoccupied with, the fate of all mankind and such. He gestures towards Zarathustra, who is now deep into a description of the Egyptian afterlife, complete with elaborate burial rituals and mummification practices. Clearly, he's not going to be much help in solving the ancient Egyptian food truck delivery debate. Fine, I concede, but I'm going to look into it. I bet there were camel-powered delivery services. I just know it. Darius rolls his eyes, but there's a hint of a smile playing on his lips. He knows I'm not going to let this go. And honestly, neither am I. The image of a camel trotting through the desert, laden with baskets of dates and figs, is too compelling to resist. It's a quirky little detail that adds another layer to my growing fascination with this ancient civilization. Beyond the gold and the grandeur, beyond the pharaohs and the pyramids, there's a human element I'm starting to connect with. They weren't just gods and kings. They were people who lived, breathed, and, apparently, freshened their breath in unique ways. They were farmers and builders, innovators and artists. They were, in a way, not so different from us. Except for the crocodile dung thing. Let's just agree to disagree on that one. As Zarathustra continues his tale, weaving together stories of gods and mortals, I find myself caught between the awe-inspiring scale of ancient Egypt and the strangely compelling question of desert food trucks. It's a bizarre juxtaposition, I'll admit, but somehow it works. It makes this distant world feel a little bit closer, a little bit more real, and it makes me even more eager to see it for myself, to walk among the ruins of those towering temples, to feel the desert sun on my skin, and to perhaps, just perhaps, discover the fossilized remains of an ancient Egyptian food truck. Hey, a girl can dream, right? You awaken to a sky the color of bruised plum, heavy and swollen. The air, usually crisp and dry, hangs thick and humid, carrying the sharp, earthy scent of impending rain. Darius, perched on a nearby rock, watching the shifting clouds with a furrowed brow, confirms your suspicion. Rain, he says, his voice low, almost reverent. A rare event in the shifting sands. A sign. He trails off, his gaze still fixed on the churning sky. A sign of something. He doesn't elaborate, and you don't push. Darius has a way of letting silence speak volumes, and right now the silence screams of uncertainty, of a brewing storm both literal and metaphorical. The nomad camp is abuzz, the usual morning routines disrupted by the unusual weather. Some of the younger warriors whoop and holler, interpreting the rain as a blessing from the sky gods, a sure sign of victory in the upcoming battle against the Iron Clan. Others, the elders mostly, huddle together, their faces etched with worry, muttering about ill omens and the wrath of forgotten deities. Still others, bless their practical hearts, just complain about how the damp sand sticks to their feet, making walking a gritty, squelching ordeal. Nomadic problems, am I right? The tension in the air is palpable, thicker than, well, let's just say thicker than anything pleasant. Let's not revisit the unfortunate incident involving Darius, a runaway camel, and a rather large pile of crocodile dung. Some olfactory nightmares are best left undisturbed. The unusual weather definitely adds fuel to the already simmering anxieties about the impending clash with the Iron Clan. It's not hard to understand why. Throughout history, and especially in cultures deeply connected to the natural world, unusual weather events were often interpreted as omens, messages from the gods, or portents of significant events. A comet streaking across the sky, a sudden drought, an unexpected flood. These were not just meteorological phenomena, they were signs, warnings, prophecies. And this rain, in the heart of the arid shifting sands, is definitely unusual. It's the kind of event that makes you look to the heavens, searching for answers, for meaning, for some hint of what the future holds. Speaking of adapting to the elements, did you know that desert nomads, resourceful as ever, developed specialized tents that could withstand both the scorching desert sun and the occasional, unexpected downpour? Talk about resilience. They were essentially the first glamping influencers, figuring out how to stay comfortable and stylish in even the most challenging environments. I can just imagine them, posting pictures of their waterproof tents on, well, whatever the ancient equivalent of Instagram was. Carved stone tablets? Hieroglyphic hashtags? Which begs the question, how much did these high-tech, weather-resistant tents cost in ancient camel bucks? Alas, history is silent on the subject. We know they traded in livestock, precious stones, and various handcrafted goods, but the exact market value of a premium, waterproof desert tent remains a mystery. Perhaps one day, archaeologists will unearth a price list etched on a clay tablet, finally revealing the answer to this burning question. Until then, we can only speculate. But back to the gathering storm. The wind picks up, whipping the fine sand into swirling vortices that dance across the desert floor. The bruised plum sky darkens further, the clouds now a deep, ominous purple. The first fat drops of rain begin to fall, splattering against the parched earth, a welcome relief from the relentless sun, yet also a harbinger of something unknown, something powerful. The nomads scurry to secure their belongings, their movements quick and efficient, born of years of experience dealing with the unpredictable nature of the desert. The specialized tents, those ancient glamping marvels, are quickly battened down, ready to withstand the onslaught of the approaching storm. Darius remains on his perch, his silhouette stark against the darkening sky. He seems unfazed by the wind and the rain, his gaze fixed on the horizon, as if searching for something beyond the physical storm, something deeper, more profound. You join him, the rain plastering your clothes to your skin. You don't speak, there's nothing to say. The silence between you, once heavy with uncertainty, now holds a different quality, a shared sense of anticipation, of waiting for the storm to break, both literally and figuratively. The fate of the nomads, the outcome of the impending battle, the very future itself, seems to hang in the balance, suspended in the charged air, waiting for the first crack of thunder to unleash the inevitable. Darius hummed a jaunty tune, less a melody and more a series of grunts punctuated by the occasional whistle. He meticulously checked the bindings on his short sword, a sturdy, well-worn blade that had clearly seen its share of sandstorms and skirmishes. Next, he tested the draw weight of his bow, the sinewy wood creaking in protest. Finally, he hefted a small, leather pouch, giving it a shake that produced a faint, rattling sound. "Scorpion sting powder," he announced with a conspiratorial wink. "Guaranteed to make your day interesting." He paused, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Probably not FDA approved, though." I raised an eyebrow, trying not to imagine the contents of the pouch. Darius caught my look and chuckled. "Relax. A scout's greatest weapon isn't his blade, but his wits." He tapped the side of his head with a grin. Then he pointed to a small clay pot hanging from his belt. "Exhibit A." He dipped a finger in the pot and smeared a thick yellowish paste across his forehead and cheeks. I squinted. "Was that?" "Best sunscreen in the desert," Darius declared proudly. "All natural ingredients." He winked again, and I realized with a shudder that the all-natural ingredients were probably exactly what I thought they were. Organic warfare, indeed. My respect for Darius's courage took on a whole new dimension. Facing the unknown desert with humor and steely determination was one thing. Surviving Darius's cooking and his sunscreen was quite another. I made a mental note to invest in a wide-brimmed hat and some very strong sunblock the next time we were in a market. He finished his preparations and turned to me, his face now a mosaic of yellow and brown. "Ready to see what wonders the desert holds today?" I swallowed, trying to suppress the image of dung beetles diligently contributing to Darius's skincare routine. "Absolutely," I lied, admiring the casual way he faced the dangers that lurked beyond the dunes. It was a courage born not of recklessness, but of a deep understanding and respect for the wilderness, paired with a peculiar brand of pragmatism. It made me think about the other scouts I'd met, the varied tools and weapons they carried, each tailored to their specific needs and environments. Some favored throwing knives, others relied on nets and traps. I'd even heard tales of scouts who carried specialized climbing gear to scale the treacherous rock formations that dotted some parts of the desert. Each scout, it seemed, developed their own unique approach to survival, a testament to the adaptability of the human spirit. And then there were the more esoteric skills. I'd read once about nomadic tribes who trained their members in the art of hypnosis, using it to calm agitated animals, or even, it was rumored, to influence the minds of their enemies. I dismissed it at the time as fanciful folklore, but now, watching Darius, I wasn't so sure. We came across a particularly large scorpion. Its tail arched menacingly. Most people would give it a wide berth, but Darius crouched down, extending a hand towards the creature. He began to murmur, a low, rhythmic chant that seemed to vibrate in the air. The scorpion, surprisingly, stilled. It lowered its tail and, impossibly, seemed to relax. Darius continued his murmuring, his hand now inches from the deadly stinger. Then, with a deft movement, he plucked the stinger clean off. The scorpion, seemingly unfazed, simply scuttled away. Darius held the stinger up to the sun, examining it with a satisfied grin. "One more for the collection," he said, tucking it carefully into a small compartment in his belt. He saw the look of utter disbelief on my face and chuckled. "Don't worry, it's a painless process, for the scorpion at least." Which brought me back to the scorpion sting powder. Did it actually contain scorpion stings? The image of Darius carefully harvesting stingers from hypnotized scorpions flashed through my mind. It was disturbingly plausible. I suddenly had the urge to write a research paper. The efficacy of hypnotically harvested scorpion venom in nomadic defense strategies. It had a certain ring to it. "Come on," Darius said, interrupting my academic musings. "The desert waits for no one, not even aspiring entomologists." He set off again, his stride confident and purposeful, a true nomad at home in his unforgiving yet endlessly fascinating domain. And I followed, still pondering the mysteries of scorpion hypnosis and the potential pharmacological applications thereof. The sand crunched under Darius's sandals as he strode into the courtyard, the setting sun painting the mud brick walls in shades of orange and purple. He carried the scent of the desert with him, a dry, dusty aroma that clung to his tunic and beard. He looked weary, the kind of weary that comes not from physical exertion, but from the endless monotony of patrol. "Anything interesting out there in the vast expanse of nothingness?" I asked, offering him a water skin. He took a long draught, the water gurgling as it quenched his thirst. "More interesting than you'd think," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "The desert winds carry more than just sand, you know. They carry whispers." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Whispers of what, exactly? Lost oases? Mirages of particularly alluring date palms?" Darius chuckled. "Something more substantial than that. Whispers of resistance." "Resistance?" I sat up straighter. "Against us?" "Against the glorious Achaemenid Empire, yes," Darius confirmed. A flicker of something. Annoyance? Concern? In his eyes. "It seems the Egyptians aren't entirely enamored with our culinary contributions. Apparently, barley and dried dates don't quite measure up to whatever delicacies they were accustomed to. Something tells me they probably don't appreciate food that tastes like old boots either. So what are these whispers saying? Actual organized resistance? Or just grumbling over dinner?" "A bit of both, from what I can gather," Darius replied, leaning against a crumbling section of wall. "There's talk of priests plotting in the shadows, farmers hiding grain rather than handing it over to the tax collectors, and," he hesitated, a smirk playing on his lips, "something about a secret society of cat worshippers." I burst out laughing. "Cat worshippers? Really? What are they going to do, overthrow us with an army of purring kittens?" "Hey, don't underestimate the power of a well-placed hairball," Darius said, grinning. "But in all seriousness, it's hard to tell what's real and what's just desert folklore. Even the most outlandish rumors have power, you know. They plant seeds of hope or fear. They can inspire action or paralyze it. And if you're Zarathustra, they can convince you that fermented camel milk cures everything. Trust me, I've seen it." I considered his words. He was right. Rumors, even absurd ones, could take on a life of their own, shaping perceptions and influencing events. So what do? Investigate these rumors? Round up all the cats in Egypt? Darius shrugged. "We listen. We observe. We separate the wheat from the chaff, the legitimate threats from the cat conspiracies. For now, it's mostly whispers. But whispers can turn into shouts, and shouts can turn into rebellion. We need to be ready. Later that night, huddled around a flickering oil lamp, I started digging into the archives, searching for any historical precedent for Egyptian resistance. I found plenty of documented rebellions, mostly centered around the Nile Delta, where resentment of Persian rule ran deep. The Egyptians, with their rich history and complex culture, weren't exactly thrilled about being ruled by an empire whose culinary preferences seemed to consist primarily of things that could be dried and stored for months. And then I stumbled upon something truly bizarre. A passage describing the role of cats in ancient Egyptian society. Apparently, cats weren't just beloved pets. They were revered as sacred animals, often trained by priests to hunt vermin in the granaries. So the cat worshipper rumor wasn't entirely baseless. Intriguing, my mind began to race. Trained cats, hunting vermin. Could they have been trained for other purposes as well? Could these feline guardians have been used to, I don't know, sabotage Persian supplies? Deliver coded messages? Perhaps even overthrow the empire? Okay, that last one was a stretch, even for me. But the idea took root. I pictured legions of highly trained cats stealthily navigating the shadows, disrupting Persian patrols, sowing chaos in the ranks. Were these cats trained in parkour? I imagined them leaping across rooftops, scaling walls, disappearing into the darkness with feline grace. I chuckled to myself. It was a ludicrous thought, a fanciful flight of historical imagination, but still, more research was required. I spent the next few hours poring over scrolls, searching for any mention of weaponized felines. I found nothing conclusive, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Perhaps there was more to these cat whispers than met the eye. The next morning, I approached Darius, armed with my newfound knowledge. "So, about those cat worshippers," I began. He groaned. "Please don't tell me you've been up all night researching feline military tactics." "Not exactly," I said, trying to maintain a serious expression. "But I did discover that Egyptian priests often used trained cats to hunt vermin." Darius raised an eyebrow. And, I continued, perhaps these cats could have been trained for other purposes. Espionage, perhaps? Sabotage? Darius sighed, but a hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. "You're serious, aren't you?" "Well, consider it," I pressed on. "Cats are agile, stealthy, and they can get into places that humans can't. They could be the perfect spies." Darius laughed. All right. I'll concede that the idea of a secret society of ninja cats is entertaining. But I think we're dealing with something a bit more mundane. Disgruntled farmers, ambitious priests, the usual suspects. Still, keep your eyes open. You never know what you might find in the land of pyramids and parkouring cats. Zarathustra's voice, amplified by the natural acoustics of the canyon walls, boomed across the desert. It snaked through the dunes, a prophet's call summoning the scattered tribe. They emerged from their tents, weathered faces etched with curiosity and apprehension, drawn towards the central fire like moths to a flickering flame. Their movements were fluid, born from a lifetime of navigating the shifting sands. "The Shahanshah, the King of Kings, demands our allegiance," Zarathustra proclaimed, his staff striking the ground with a resounding thud. "Cambyses, ruler of Persia, prepares to march on Egypt. He calls upon the sons and daughters of the desert to join his conquering host." Which, seriously, makes me wonder if Cambyses offered frequent conqueror miles. Like, every 10th pyramid you help sack gets you a free camel? Just a thought. A palpable tension settled over the assembled nomads. Whispers, like the rustle of wind across dry leaves, rippled through the crowd. Their faces, illuminated by the firelight, were a canvas of conflicting emotions. Loyalty to Persia, the dominant power that offered a semblance of stability and protection, warred with the deep-seated solidarity they felt with their fellow desert dwellers, the Egyptians, who now faced invasion. Some clenched their fists, their expressions fierce and resolute. Others hung their heads, burdened by the weight of the decision. This wasn't just a political alliance. It was a choice between potentially betraying their desert kin or facing the wrath of a powerful empire. Darius paced restlessly on the periphery of the gathering, the sand crunching beneath his worn sandals. He was a scout, a tracker, a man of the desert, not a politician. His duty was to observe, to gather information, not to choose sides in these complex power struggles. He squinted at the setting sun, a fiery orb sinking below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and violet. He absently rubbed his nose, smearing a thick white streak across his cheek. "Blast it all," he muttered under his breath. His sunscreen, the thick, zinc-based concoction essential for survival under the relentless desert sun, had clearly chosen a side, and that side was my nose. Nomadic tribes throughout history have often found themselves caught in these precarious political crosscurrents. Forced to navigate the shifting sands of allegiance, they were constantly weighing the benefits of aligning with powerful empires against the risks of betraying their own cultural and familial ties. It was a delicate balancing act, a constant struggle for survival in a world dominated by larger, more established powers. Fact, it's well documented. Look it up. Seriously, I'm not making this stuff up. And speaking of navigating, the desert nomads, with their intimate knowledge of the terrain and their ingenuity, developed specialized tools and techniques for traversing the treacherous sand dunes. Think ancient dune buggies, but with more camels, fewer cup holders, and probably a lot more complaining about the lack of air conditioning. Quirky fact, right there. You're welcome. Now, about those dune buggies. How effective were they really? Did they tip over easily? Were there ancient camel-powered tow trucks for when they inevitably got stuck? These are the burning questions that keep historians up at night. Okay, maybe not twine all historians, but definitely some of us, the cool ones. The problem is, primary sources are scarce. We need more evidence, and preferably written ones. Carvings on tent poles, while aesthetically pleasing, don't exactly provide detailed technical specifications. So, if anyone out there happens to stumble upon an ancient nomad's owner's manual for a camel-powered sand chariot, please, for the love of history, get in touch. The debate rages on. Some scholars, citing fragmented pottery shards depicting what might be wheels and axles, argue that these vehicles were highly sophisticated, capable of traversing even the most challenging dunes with ease. Others, pointing to the lack of any actual physical remains of these contraptions, dismiss them as fanciful legends, the stuff of campfire stories and exaggerated boasts. Darius stopped pacing and looked toward Zarathustra. The old man, his voice hoarse but still carrying, was outlining the terms of the Shahanshah's offer: provisions, protection, and the promise of plunder from the conquered lands. The nomads listened intently, weighing the words, their faces etched with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Darius knew that their decision, whatever it might be, would have far-reaching consequences. It could determine the fate of their tribe, the outcome of the impending war, and the very landscape of power in the region. He sighed, pushing a stray lock of sand-colored hair from his eyes. He was a scout, not a politician. But even a scout couldn't remain neutral forever in the face of such momentous events. The desert, like the politics of empires, was a constantly shifting landscape, and even the most skilled navigators could find themselves caught in its unpredictable currents. And in the meantime, his sunscreen continued its relentless migration towards my nostrils. Perhaps, he mused, the real dilemma wasn't about political alliances, but about finding a sunscreen that stayed where it was supposed to. The crackling fire cast flickering shadows across the weathered faces of the assembled nomads. A hushed debate rippled through the group, punctuated by the occasional sharp intake of breath and the rustle of worn cloaks. Their voices, roughened by the desert wind, carried a mixture of apprehension and simmering defiance. "Suicidal," one man rasped, his hand nervously gripping the hilt of his curved dagger. "The Persian army is a sandstorm of steel. We're but a handful of dust devils against them." A younger nomad, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and excitement, countered. "My grandmother spoke of prophecies, whispers passed down through generations. They foretell the fall of empires, the crumbling of stone before the wind. Persia's might is not eternal." He paused, glancing around to see if his words resonated. Spoiler alert, the prophecies were accurate. An old woman, her face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by sun and hardship, nodded slowly. "The sands themselves whisper of change," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the crackling flames. "The time of the oppressor is waning." The debate continued to ebb and flow, a tide of uncertainty washing over the assembled nomads. Their fate, it seemed, hung precariously in the balance, as fragile as a spider's web strung across a canyon. Zarathustra, until then a silent observer, stepped forward. The firelight danced in his eyes, reflecting a depth of wisdom gleaned from years spent navigating the unforgiving desert. He raised a hand, silencing the anxious whispers. "The desert teaches us many things," he began, his voice calm and steady, resonating with quiet authority. "It teaches us caution, yes, the wisdom of the scorpion who waits in the shade. But it also teaches us courage, the tenacity of the desert flower that blooms even in the harshest conditions. We have learned to survive the sandstorms, to find sustenance where others see only barrenness." He smiled faintly, a glint of humor in his eyes. "And," he added with a wink, "we have learned to make a decent cup of tea from practically anything." His words seemed to settle on the nomads like a gentle rain on parched earth, calming their fears and bolstering their resolve. A quiet murmur of agreement rippled through the group. They had endured hardship before. They could endure this too. Darius, standing slightly apart from the group, listened intently. He was, officially, just a scout, sent to gather intelligence on the nomads. Yet, tonight, he felt the weight of history settling upon his shoulders, heavy as a camel's saddle laden with dates. He knew that the decisions made in this firelit circle could have far-reaching consequences, sparking a flame of rebellion that could engulf the entire region. He watched Zarathustra, recognizing the power of his words, the quiet charisma that could inspire men and women to fight for their freedom. Prophecies and religious beliefs, Darius mused, have often been the catalyst for resistance movements throughout history. They offer a glimmer of hope in times of despair, a vision of a future free from oppression. He'd seen it before, the way a shared belief could bind people together, giving them the courage to challenge even the mightiest of empires. He remembered a story his grandfather had told him about a group of mountain dwellers who, inspired by a vision from their oracle, had held off a vastly superior army for months. The power of belief, he knew, could be a formidable weapon. A quirky thought flitted across his mind. Some desert nomads, he'd heard, believed they could communicate with spirits through sand divination. They would cast handfuls of sand onto the ground, interpreting the patterns formed as messages from the other world. He chuckled softly. He'd tried it once himself, out of curiosity. The message he'd received? Get more sleep. Not exactly earth-shattering prophecy. Could sand divination truly predict the outcome of ancient battles? He doubted it. His own experience suggested it was more likely to offer mundane advice than strategic insights. Then again, he thought with a wry smile, his sand divination he had accurately predicted his morning latte. Perhaps it wasn't entirely useless after all. He could interpret the swirling patterns of the coffee grounds in his cup as a sign of impending victory, or maybe just a sign that he needed another cup. The debate among the nomads continued late into the night. The fire burned low, mirroring the dwindling reserves of fear and uncertainty in their hearts. Zarathustra's words had planted a seed of hope, and now, under the vast expanse of the desert sky, that seed began to germinate. They spoke of strategy, of tactics, of utilizing their intimate knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. They discussed the risks, the sacrifices they would have to make. But in their voices, Darius could hear a growing resolve, a hardening of purpose. The desert, which had taught them resilience and resourcefulness, was now fueling their spirit of rebellion. They were no longer just nomads clinging to survival in a harsh land. They were becoming warriors, ready to fight for their freedom. The whispers of rebellion, once hesitant and fragmented, were now coalescing into a roar, ready to challenge the might of the Persian Empire. The sands of the desert, once symbols of their vulnerability, were about to become the foundation of their resistance. The echoes of their defiance, Darius knew, would reverberate far beyond the confines of their firelit circle. The air crackled with tension, thick and heavy like the desert heat before a sandstorm. Swords scraped against scabbards, the restless shifting of soldiers, a counterpoint to the heated debate echoing off the canyon walls. Phrases like honorable combat, strategic advantage, and inevitable victory bounced around, each a sharp pebble thrown into the already turbulent waters of the parley. My eyes, though, were fixed on Darius. He stood apart from the clustered groups of Egyptian and Persian dignitaries, a lone figure at the edge of the drama, his face etched with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't fear, not exactly, but a deep contemplation, as if he were tracing lines in the sand with his mind. Then, with a sudden resolve, he moved. He bypassed the generals bristling with weapons, the advisors whispering poison into the ears of their respective leaders, and walked straight towards Zarathustra. The Persian king, a figure of imposing authority in his richly embroidered robes, watched Darius's approach with a raised eyebrow, a flicker of curiosity in his gaze. Darius didn't offer a bow, not a deep obeisance like the other scouts and messengers. He stopped a respectful distance away, his hands empty of any weapon or offering, save for the calloused lines etched into his palms that spoke of years spent navigating the harsh desert landscape. And then he spoke. His voice, normally quiet, carried surprisingly well in the tense silence. He spoke not of surrender, not of allegiance, but of paths. He spoke of hidden trails winding through the treacherous mountain passes, routes known only to the desert nomads, trails that could bypass the heavily guarded main routes, trails that could lead an army through the heart of the seemingly impenetrable terrain. He offered not his sword, not the scorpion powder tucked away in his pouch, but something far more valuable, his intimate knowledge of the land. A slow smile spread across Zarathustra's face, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, but held a certain appreciation nonetheless. "Wisdom comes in many forms," he said, his voice a low rumble that resonated with an unexpected warmth. "Some whispered on the wind, some scribbled on cave walls, and some—" He paused, a twinkle appearing in his eye, mixed with crocodile dung. He let out a low chuckle, and surprisingly, a few of the surrounding dignitaries joined in, the tension momentarily broken by the absurdity of the image. Even Darius allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Zarathustra, however, quickly returned to the matter at hand. He engaged Darius in a quiet conversation, peppered with questions about water sources, the feasibility of moving large numbers of troops through the narrow passes, the potential dangers lurking in the shadows of the canyons. Darius answered each question with a concise clarity, his fingers tracing patterns in the air as if mapping the very terrain he described. Watching this exchange, a sudden realization washed over me. Darius, the seemingly insignificant desert scout, the one overlooked in the grand tapestry of empires clashing, may have just played a pivotal role in shaping the future. His knowledge, his intimate understanding of the land, could potentially shift the balance of power, determine the outcome of the war, redraw the map of the known world. Which, honestly, makes me think he deserves hazard pay, no? I mean, whispering secrets to a king who has the power to boil you in oil seems like a pretty hazardous occupation. Thinking about it, the strategic importance of local geography and warfare is undeniable. History is littered with examples of how knowledge of the terrain, the hidden paths, the secret fords, has turned the tide of battles. From the narrow mountain passes of Thermopylae to the dense forests of Teutoburg, the land itself has often been as decisive a factor as the strength of armies or the brilliance of generals. And it wasn't just about knowing the physical landscape. Nomadic tribes, with their intricate understanding of the desert, often used coded messages woven into textiles to communicate secretly. Think of it like ancient Twitter, but with fewer trolls and a lot more intricate weaving patterns. These coded messages could relay information about enemy movements, water sources, or even just the latest gossip about which camel had the fastest spit. Okay, maybe not the last one, but you get the point. The big question, of course, is what role did Darius's knowledge actually play in the grand scheme of things? Did his secret trails help the Egyptians resist the Persian invasion? The truth is, the historical record is sketchy. Sources are limited, interpretations vary, and the sands of time have a way of burying the finer details. Whether Darius became a celebrated hero or a forgotten footnote is lost to the whispers of history. But as I watched him there speaking with the king, a small, unassuming figure holding the fate of nations in his hands, I couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. He was a reminder that even in the grand narratives of empires and conquests, the seemingly insignificant can play a pivotal role, a testament to the power of knowledge, the wisdom that can be found not just in scrolls and libraries, but also in the calloused hands of a desert scout. As the first rays of dawn painted the desert sky with strokes of rose and gold, the sand, cool beneath my sandals, began to radiate a gentle warmth. I stood beside Darius, his weathered face etched with the stories of 1,000 desert patrols. This, he'd told me, was his last. A sense of finality hung in the air, thicker than the dust motes dancing in the nascent sunlight. He pointed a gnarled finger towards the east, where a smudge of ochre marred the horizon's otherwise pristine canvas. "The Persians," he said, his voice low, almost a rumble, like distant thunder rolling across the dunes, "marching on Egypt, their fate, unknown." The dust cloud grew, a silent, ominous presence creeping across the vast expanse. I could almost hear the rhythmic thud of thousands of feet, the clanging of armor, the snorts of horses, all carried on the faintest of desert breezes. It was a soundless symphony of impending change, a whisper of history unfolding. I closed my eyes, letting the true voice of the desert wash over me. It wasn't the silence of nothingness, but a symphony of subtle sounds, the rustle of wind-blown sand against dried grasses, the soft scuttle of unseen creatures seeking refuge from the rising sun, the distant, mournful cry of a desert hawk circling high above. It was a timeless song, a whisper of empires rising and falling, of conquerors and the conquered, of resilience and resistance. It spoke of sun-scorched sands witnessing the grand procession of civilizations, each leaving its mark, each eventually succumbing to the relentless embrace of time. It also whispered of sunscreen, specifically the distinct lack thereof on my part. I'd opted for the desert chic look, minimal covering, maximum sun exposure, a choice I suspected I would be bitterly regretting later, when my skin resembled a particularly well-done terracotta pot. Zarathustra's words, learned during long evenings around flickering campfires, echoed in my mind. The desert, he'd said, teaches two crucial lessons: survival and rebellion. The harsh environment demanded adaptation, ingenuity, a deep understanding of the land and its rhythms, but it also fostered a fierce spirit of independence, a resistance to control. The Persians, with their grand armies and imperial ambitions, might conquer Egypt, impose their laws, reshape the political landscape, but the desert would remain. It would always have its secrets, its whispers of resistance, hidden within the shifting sands and the whispering winds. Which reminded me, I hoped Cambyses had packed a good desert scarf. Those Persian boys, with their elaborate hairstyles and meticulously groomed beards, weren't going to appreciate the sandblasting effect of a desert wind. Fashion emergencies in the midst of a military campaign could seriously dampen morale. It's a documented fact, of course, that Cambyses II did conquer Egypt in 525 BCE. Another turning point in the long, intricate narrative whispered by the desert. But it's the quirky little details that truly capture my imagination. Like the fact that desert nomads often used camels as mobile libraries, carrying scrolls and stories across vast distances. Imagine entire libraries traversing the dunes on the backs of these magnificent creatures. Weren't they in essence the first Kindles? And that leads me to a rather intriguing debate. Did those camel libraries offer audiobooks? I'm picturing Darius, perched atop his camel, dramatically narrating Herodotus to a captivated audience of fellow nomads. The image alone is hilarious. Darius, with his gruff voice and dry wit, delivering pronouncements on Greek history, it would be a desert bestseller, I tell you. And then, he'd boom, Xerxes, bless his overconfident little heart, decided to build a bridge across the Hellespont. A bridge? Can you believe the audacity? The camels would probably groan in amusement, their loads of scrolls rustling like appreciative laughter. The desert whispered on, its timeless narratives interwoven with the more immediate concerns of sunburn and hypothetical audiobook performances. The Persian army marched closer, their destiny and Egypt's hanging in the balance. And I, caught between the echoes of the past and the uncertainties of the future, listened to the desert's whisper and hoped I'd packed enough aloe vera. The air, thick with incense and something floral, was a blessed relief after weeks trailing Darius and his pungent masculinity. This Psamtik III, last pharaoh of independent Egypt, at least appreciated the finer things. His court, a riot of color and whispered anxieties, shimmered in the torchlight. Psamtik, a young man burdened by a crown clearly too heavy, paced before a semicircle of advisors, his voice a low thrum of desperation. "They come like a sandstorm, unstoppable, insatiable," he lamented, gesturing sharply towards the north. Cambyses, that jackal, son of a jackal, thinks to swallow Egypt whole. What wisdom do you offer me? How do we stop this Persian juggernaut? He paused, fixing each advisor with a desperate stare, which I couldn't help but think was a bit dramatic. Still, a kingdom on the line? I supposed it warranted some pacing and hand-wringing. Made me wonder, though, did they offer a finder's fee for decent strategic advice in these times? A nice pyramid apartment, maybe? Some prime Nile front property? Something to make the risk of annoying a soon-to-be very powerful Persian worthwhile. The advisors, a collection of wizened old men in elaborate linen robes, murmured amongst themselves, offering a litany of tired pronouncements. Strengthen the Pelusiac forts, they suggested. Recall the garrisons from the south. Appeal to the gods for divine intervention. The usual. Nothing that screamed brilliant military strategy or guaranteed Persian repelling formula. Samtik ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure frustration. The Pelusiac forts will fall. The garrisons are stretched thin. And the gods, he added, a touch bitterly, seem preoccupied elsewhere. Just then the grand doors of the court swung open, admitting a figure coated in dust, his chest heaving with exertion. He stumbled towards the pharaoh, dropping to his knees. "My lord," he gasped, voice hoarse. "News from the desert." A ripple of anticipation, a collective intake of breath, swept through the court. Samtik leaned forward, his eyes alight with a flicker of hope. "Speak!" The messenger swallowed, glancing nervously around before lowering his voice to a whisper. "A nomad scout. He offers assistance, knowledge of secret paths, a chance to turn the tide." Secret paths? Now this was getting interesting. My ears perked up. Desert warfare, I'd gathered from my little sojourn with Darius, was all about logistics and terrain, knowing the backroads, the hidden oases, the routes that could bypass the Persian advance, that could be a game-changer. Samtik's face, moments before a mask of despair, now held a glimmer of something approaching optimism. "Bring this scout to me," he commanded, his voice regaining some of its regal authority. "Immediately." As the messenger scrambled to obey, the advisors erupted in a flurry of excited whispers. A secret weapon? A divine intervention, after all. Perhaps the gods weren't so preoccupied after all. While they buzzed, my mind drifted back to that odd little fact I'd unearthed about Samtik's reign. Brief though it was, mosquito nets, silk mosquito nets. Not the coarse camel hair you might expect in a desert kingdom, but luxurious, shimmering silk. Fancy. It painted a strange picture, didn't it? A pharaoh facing imminent invasion, the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders, yet concerned enough about pesky insects to invest in premium sleepwear. And it raised questions. How comfortable could those silk mosquito nets possibly be in the stifling desert heat? Did they have some kind of ancient Egyptian cooling model? A net woven with magically chilled threads? A tiny hand-cranked fan built into the frame? I pictured Samtik tossing and turning beneath his luxurious canopy, sweating profusely, swatting at phantom mosquitoes while his kingdom crumbled around him. The sources, alas, are silent on these crucial details. History, as usual, focuses on the grand narratives, the battles and betrayals, while leaving the truly important questions unanswered. The comfort levels of ancient Egyptian royalty, for example, the precise thread count of their insect protection. The messenger returned, leading a wiry figure draped in desert robes. The scout's face was weathered and lined, his eyes sharp and intelligent. He bowed deeply before Samtik, his voice a low rumble as he began to speak, his words a blend of guttural consonants and clicking sounds that I couldn't begin to decipher. But one thing was clear. The fate of Egypt, for now, rested on this nomad's knowledge of the desert, on his whispers of secret paths and hidden routes. Samtik, his advisors, and even I, a bewildered spectator from another time, hung on every word. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I still wondered about those silk mosquito nets. Were they worth it? Did they at least keep the sand out? You watch as the Egyptian generals, their faces a canvas of worry lines, huddle around a large papyrus map spread out on a low table. The air crackles with tension. Their fingers trace the inexorable advance of the Persian army, marked by tiny painted figures, an overwhelming swarm of red, steadily encroaching on the green of Egyptian territory. Too numerous, too well equipped. Victory seems impossible. which makes me think I should offer them my Netflix subscription. Plenty of great documentaries on battle strategy. Maybe a marathon of Sun Tzu. Although, considering the circumstances, times 300 asterisks might not be the best choice. Darius strides into the tent, a figure etched in bronze by the desert sun. His face, weathered and lined, speaks of countless days spent under the scorching sky. He moves with the easy grace of a man who calls the desert home, his presence a stark contrast to the starched linen and polished bronze of the Egyptian officers. He nods respectfully to Pharaoh Psamtik, then, without a word, points to the map. His finger traces a path through the rugged terrain, along narrow mountain passes, barely discernible trails winding through canyons and across desolate plains. He speaks in rapid-fire Egyptian, infused with the guttural clicks and whistles of his native tongue. He describes a daring plan, a strategy born not of grand military academies, but of generations of nomadic wisdom, of intimate knowledge of the desert's capricious nature. He talks of using the terrain to their advantage, of ambushes in the narrow defiles, of drawing the Persians deeper into the unforgiving wilderness, turning their superior numbers and heavy equipment into a liability. He paints a picture of a victory snatched from the jaws of defeat, using the desert as their ally. He pauses, pulls a small, intricately carved wooden box from his satchel, and offers it to Psamtik. Sun protection, great pharaoh. The desert's embrace can be harsh. Psamtik eyes the contents with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, a thick, ochre-colored paste. He politely declines. Darius shrugs and replaces the box, seemingly unfazed by the rejection. You realize, watching the exchange, that nomadic knowledge, the desert's wisdom, may hold the key to Egypt's survival, at least for a while. These generals, accustomed to the predictable rhythms of the Nile, the flat, fertile plains, are out of their depth in this harsh, unforgiving landscape. They see only insurmountable obstacles. Darius sees opportunity. The Battle of Pelusium, as history will record, was a decisive Persian victory. The sheer weight of the Persian army, their superior weaponry, ultimately overwhelmed the Egyptian defenses. Darius's tactical brilliance, his intimate knowledge of the desert, might have delayed the inevitable, might have inflicted some losses on the invaders, but it could not change the course of history. And now for a quirky fact, because, let's face it, history can be dry. The Egyptians, being rather fastidious about personal hygiene, used a type of ancient deodorant. And what, you might ask, was this fragrant concoction made of? Crocodile dung. Yes, you read that right. Crocodile dung. Apparently, its potent aroma was deemed preferable to the alternative. Darius, for reasons best known to himself, seems quite taken with this historical tidbit. He keeps trying to convince everyone that Crocstick would be a fantastic name for a modern revival of this ancient hygiene product. Stop trying to make Crocstick happen, Darius. It's not going to happen. The historical record is frustratingly silent on certain details. Did Psamtik truly appreciate Darius's tactical insights? Did he recognize the brilliance of a strategy born of the desert? Or was he just relieved that the scout for once wasn't trying to share his unique sunscreen? Primary sources are, sadly, lacking. We can only speculate. Perhaps, in the quiet of his tent, after the generals had departed, Psamtik allowed himself a small smile, a flicker of admiration for the desert-wise scout. Or perhaps he just wrinkled his nose and called for a servant to bring him some incense. A lot of incense. The desert whispers its secrets to those who listen. Darius listened. Whether anyone else did, remains a mystery lost to the sands of time. One thing is certain. The clash between the mighty Persian Empire and the ancient kingdom of Egypt, played out on the shifting sands of the desert, was a pivotal moment in history. And somewhere, in the footnotes of that history, between the grand strategies and the clash of armies, lies the story of a scout, his strange sunscreen, and a forgotten deodorant made of crocodile dung. The gritty dust of the Sinai swirled around my sandals, clinging to the sweat-soaked linen of my tunic. We were nestled amongst the jagged rocks, the mountain pass a natural bottleneck. Sun-baked granite offered meager cover, but enough, hopefully. Around me, the Egyptian soldiers shifted nervously, gripping their bows, spears, and kopashes. The air crackled with a tension so thick you could taste it. The metallic tang of fear, the bitter dust, and, faintly, the lingering aroma of Darius's strategy. Let's just say his plan involved a certain disguise, and leave it at that. The success of this whole mad scheme hinged on the Persians not having a particularly keen sense of smell. Darius's plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. We were outnumbered, out-equipped, and relying on the element of surprise to even the odds. If the Persians got wind of what we were up to, we'd be slaughtered. The plan was simple. Wait, spring the trap, pray to Ra. Simple, but the timing had to be perfect. An eternity passed, marked only by the shifting desert wind and the occasional nervous cough. Then, finally, a flicker of movement in the distance. Persian scouts, clad in their distinctive bronze armor, crested the rise, their mounts kicking up plumes of dust. They rode with the casual arrogance of an army, expecting no resistance. This was it. A sharp whistle cut through the tense silence, the signal. The ambush was sprung. Like hornets from a disturbed nest, Egyptian archers rose from their hiding places, loosing a volley of arrows that darkened the sky. Screams mingled with the twang of bowstrings. Horses reared, throwing their riders. The Persian advance faltered, dissolving into chaos. Confusion reigned supreme. For a few glorious hours, victory seemed within our grasp. The narrow pass channeled the Persian forces, funneling them into the kill zone. Our archers, taking advantage of the high ground, rained down death from above. Persian soldiers, disoriented and leaderless, stumbled over the bodies of their fallen comrades. It felt like we might actually pull this off. This feels like a good moment for an intermission. Things are going pretty well. A little too well, if you know what I mean. Grab some popcorn, hit the bathroom, stretch your legs. This is probably the calm before the storm. Right, back to it then. Where were we? Ah, yes, momentary triumph against overwhelming odds. Well, as they say, pride comes before a fall, and in ancient warfare, falls tend to involve a lot of pointy objects. Now, before we dive back into the carnage, let's take a quick detour into the fascinating world of historical trivia. Ambushes, like the one we're currently embroiled in, were a common tactic in ancient warfare. Think of it as the ancient equivalent of hiding behind a rock in a video game and waiting for your opponent to wander into your crosshairs. Effective, if a little unglamorous. And here's a quirky fact for you. The ancient Egyptians were renowned for their brewing skills. They practically invented beer. Civilized, weren't they? Imagine, after a hard day's ambushing, cracking open a cold one with your mates. Sadly, no such luck for us. Now, back to the less than civilized business at hand. The question that historians have debated for centuries, well, maybe not centuries, but a good long while, is, where was Darius during all this? Did he personally participate in the ambush, leading his troops from the front, disguised as, well, let's not go there again? Or did he offer moral support from a safe distance, perhaps upwind, where the tactical aroma wouldn't be so overpowering? Sources, as always, are frustratingly ambiguous. Some accounts paint him as a brave warrior leading the charge. Others suggest he was more of a strategic observer. Personally, I suspect the latter. Let's be honest, the whole disguise thing doesn't scream frontline commander. But then again, history is full of surprises. The initial wave of the Persian attack had been broken, but their numbers were simply too vast. Fresh troops, seemingly endless, poured through the pass. The tide began to turn. Our archers, exhausted and running low on arrows, struggled to maintain the barrage. The Persian infantry, regrouped and reorganized, began to push back, slowly but relentlessly. The close-quarters fighting was brutal. The clang of metal on metal, the cries of the wounded, the sickening thud of bodies hitting the ground. The initial euphoria of victory evaporated, replaced by a grim determination to simply survive. The narrow pass, once our advantage, now became a death trap, a bottleneck where we were pressed together, fighting back-to-back against the relentless Persian advance. The air, once thick with tension, now hung heavy with the stench of blood and sweat. The dust kicked up by the fighting choked our lungs and stung our eyes. The screams of the dying echoed off the canyon walls. The Persians, driven by sheer weight of numbers, began to gain ground. Where was Darius? That's what I kept asking myself amidst the chaos. Was he out there, somewhere in the thick of the fighting, leading his troops? Or was he observing from afar, calculating the odds, perhaps already planning his next move? The answer, lost in the swirling dust and the din of battle, remained elusive. The ambush, so meticulously planned, so brilliantly executed in its initial stages, was falling apart. The Persians, adapting to the terrain and our tactics, were slowly but surely grinding us down. Hope, that fleeting flicker that had burned so brightly just hours before, began to dim, threatened to be extinguished altogether by the overwhelming tide of Persian steel. You watch, heart sinking faster than a stone in the Nile, as the initial Persian confusion gives way to grim determination. They're like ants, disturbed but not deterred, swarming back into formation, their bronze shields flashing in the relentless sun. The Egyptians, outnumbered, outmaneuvered, their ambush turned sour, begin to crumble. Their earlier cries of victory morph into shouts of fear, the tide of battle turning against them with terrifying speed. It reminds me of that time I tried to bake a cake for my niece's birthday. Looked fantastic coming out of the oven, all puffed up and golden. Then, as it cooled, it deflated into a sad, sunken mess. Turns out I'd forgotten the baking powder, a crucial ingredient, much like, say, a viable escape route when facing the might of the Persian Empire. The Egyptians break. What began as a bold strike against the invaders has devolved into a chaotic rout. Dust devils dance across the battlefield, swirling with the cries of the dying and the thunder of hooves. Even Darius, usually so stoic, has a look of concern etched on his face, his hand hovering near the pommel of his sword. He bellows orders, his voice barely audible above the din, his words sharp and decisive. He commands a retreat. The desert, he knows, teaches not only courage but the wisdom of knowing when to run. Especially, I imagine, when you're upwind of Darius. The man's diet consisted primarily of dates and fermented goat's milk. Trust me, you don't want to be downwind. Ever. As the remnants of the Egyptian force melt away into the shimmering heat haze, you realize that even in defeat, there's a spark that remains. The nomads, their faces streaked with dust and blood, their eyes burning with defiance, fight with a ferocious intensity that belies their dwindling numbers. They embody a spirit that even the crushing weight of the Persian Empire cannot extinguish. It's the kind of reckless courage that plants seeds, seeds of future rebellion, seeds of hope that will blossom in generations to come. Which makes me wonder, did Darius in his spare time offer escape route consulting as a side hustle? Darius's desert detours will get you out of any tight spot unless you're Egyptian. It's a niche market, sure, but I bet he'd have a stellar Yelp rating. Let's talk facts. Because even in the midst of chaotic desert warfare, facts are important. The Persian invasion of Egypt was, to put it mildly, brutal. They weren't exactly known for their gentle approach to conquest. Think less flowery welcome basket, and more scorched earth and heavy taxation. Now, for a quirky fact. The ancient Egyptians were surprisingly adept dentists. Yes, amidst the pyramids and the pharaohs and the mummification, they found time to develop advanced dental practices. They understood the importance of dental hygiene, even in a desert environment. Makes you wonder if they had little miniature scarab-shaped toothbrushes. I mean, if you're going to build pyramids, you might as well have a sparkling smile while doing it. Dental hygiene matters, people, even in a desert. And now, for a bit of historical debate. Did Darius's tactical brilliance, his ability to read the shifting sands of both the literal and metaphorical deserts, ultimately prolong Egyptian resistance? Or did it simply serve to infuriate the Persians, making them even more determined to crush any flicker of rebellion? Sources, as you might expect, are frustratingly unclear. Some ancient scrolls hint that Darius's strategic retreats and calculated maneuvers allowed the Egyptians to regroup, to preserve their strength for future battles. Others suggest that his actions only served to prolong the inevitable, adding fuel to the Persian fire, turning a swift conquest into a drawn-out, bloody affair. It's like trying to reconstruct a broken vase from a handful of dusty shards. You can get a general idea of the shape, but the details remain elusive. History, it seems, loves a good mystery. And honestly, I'm here for it. Keeps things interesting. Just like those surprisingly advanced ancient Egyptian dentists. Seriously, miniature scarab toothbrushes? Someone needs to get on that. The dust swirled around Psamtik III, a rust-colored halo crowning a head bowed in defeat. His royal regalia, once vibrant, was now stained with the grime of battle and despair. He stood, less a king, more a broken reed before the conquering wind. Cambyses, the Persian king, a man whose ambition burned hotter than the desert sun, looked down at him. His eyes, the color of flint, held no pity, only the cold satisfaction of victory. With a sweep of his hand, encompassing the vast, sun-baked landscape, he declared Egypt his. Mine, the gesture seemed to scream, the ancient land, the fertile Nile, the towering pyramids, all mine. I watched, a silent observer amongst the chaos, and couldn't help but wonder, was there some kind of ancient empire acquisition clause in Cambyses' contract? Did he get bonus points for conquering Egypt, a sort of buy one empire, get a pyramid-free deal? The absurdity of the thought briefly pierced the heavy atmosphere of defeat. Off to the side, Darius, the mastermind behind Cambyses' victory, stood apart from the celebratory roar of the Persian army. He watched the scene unfold with a strange detachment, his gaze fixed on the endless expanse of the desert. He shook his head slowly, a barely audible whisper escaping his lips. "The desert will endure, even empires crumble." His words, carried on the wind, struck a chord within me. They spoke of a timeless truth, a perspective that dwarfed even the grand spectacle of conquest unfolding before us. And suddenly, I had an overwhelming craving for some of that Egyptian beer I'd heard about. Something about the weight of history, the rise and fall of civilizations, always made me thirsty. The scene was heartbreaking, the final act in a drama played out across centuries. Yet, even in the face of such utter defeat, something else stirred in the air. A fragile hope, tenacious as a desert flower pushing through the cracked earth after a sandstorm. It was in the eyes of the Egyptian people, standing stoic amidst the ruins of their kingdom. A spark of resilience, a quiet defiance, a promise of renewal. It was a reminder that life, like the desert, finds a way. And it reminded me that I really need to water my cacti when I get home. They've been looking a little parched lately. History records the grim fate of Psamtik III. He was executed by Cambyses, a brutal end to a once powerful reign. A stark reminder of the often cruel whims of fate. And yet, amidst the historical accounts of battles and conquests, there are glimpses of everyday life in ancient Egypt. Did you know, for instance, that they played board games? Senet, a game of strategy and chance, was a popular pastime, fun for the whole family. Imagine a pharaoh, after a long day of ruling, settling down for a friendly game of Senet with the kids. It's a strange but comforting thought, a reminder that even in the midst of grand historical narratives, life goes on, filled with its small joys and everyday rituals. The fate of Darius, however, remains shrouded in a certain ambiguity. Did he ever get paid for his services? Did Cambyses hand him a sack of gold, a deed to a prime piece of Persian real estate? Or was he compensated in something less conventional? Crocodile dung sunscreen, perhaps? A popular theory amongst certain fringe historians, I might add. We may never know the truth. The historical record is silent on this matter, leaving us to speculate, to ponder the mysteries of ancient financial transactions. Was there an ancient equivalent of Venmo? Did Darius send Cambyses a payment request with the memo? Consulting services, conquering Egypt. Please pay promptly. The thought makes me chuckle. The fall of the pharaoh was more than just the end of a dynasty. It was the closing of a chapter in the grand story of human civilization. But like all endings, it contained within it the seeds of new beginnings. The desert, after all, endures. It witnesses the rise and fall of empires, the ebb and flow of power, the endless cycle of destruction and renewal. And perhaps, within its vast, silent expanse, lies the greatest wisdom of all. A wisdom that whispers on the wind, reminding us that even in the face of defeat, hope endures. And that sometimes, all you need is a good Egyptian beer. And maybe some crocodile dung sunscreen. You never know. The nomad encampment was a shadow of its former boisterous self. A heavy quiet hung in the air, thick with the dust of fallen empires. Egypt, that ancient bastion of power, had crumbled. The Persian banner, a stylized falcon with outstretched wings, now rippled across a vast swath of the known world. It felt suffocating. The future, once a shimmering mirage on the horizon, had become a bleak, sun-baked wasteland. Good thing I had curated a killer bedtime story playlist, a soothing mix of ancient lullabies and surprisingly upbeat funeral dirges to keep my spirits up. Seriously, you haven't lived until you've heard a lyre rendition of Don't Worry, Be Happy. Zarathustra, his usually vibrant robes now muted with dust, stood before the assembled tribe. His voice, though quiet, carried the weight of centuries of nomadic wisdom. The desert, he began, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his people, is a harsh mistress. She offers no easy solace, no gentle hand. But she teaches a valuable lesson, one that empires often forget: resilience. The ability to bend with the wind, not break. To find life where others see only desolation. To thrive, not merely survive, even when the world around you is ruled by conquerors. He paused, his eyes glinting with a familiar spark. You know, he added with a mischievous grin, this would make a great folk song. Something catchy, with a repetitive chorus about camels and dew collection. I'll work on it later. Darius, leaning against a weathered saddle, smiled wryly. The old man's right, he said, his voice rough as desert sand. A scout's work is never done. Empires may rise and fall, borders shift like dunes in the wind, but there are always new mountains to climb, new trails to blaze, new secrets whispered on the wind. He gave me a pointed look, which, if I may be so bold, should warrant a significant raise. Just saying. He had a point. Hazard pay for living in the shadow of a sprawling, newly minted empire seemed fair. Very fair. Nomadic cultures, and I'd witnessed it firsthand, often possessed a remarkable resilience in the face of imperial expansion. They weren't tied to land in the same way agricultural societies were. They could adapt, move, flow around the edges of power, like water seeking the lowest ground. They were the desert's whispers, the wind's lament, the echoes of a world empires often struggled to grasp. They weren't easily conquered, not in spirit, anyway. They simply persisted. It was quite impressive, actually. And, speaking of impressive, and this is a fascinating little tidbit, desert nomads developed incredibly efficient methods for collecting dew. Essentially, they built these large stone piles in strategic locations, designed to condense atmospheric moisture and channel it into collection basins, like ancient, eco-friendly water coolers. Genius, right? They could literally wring water from the air itself. Talk about making the most of a challenging environment. It made our modern-day struggles with leaky faucets seem trivial. Now the big question, and one that has kept me up at night, not really, but it sounds more dramatic, how refreshing was that desert dew. I mean, picture it. A scorching sunrise, the endless expanse of sand shimmering with heat, and you, parched and weary, stumble upon this ancient dew-collecting marvel. You cup your hands, collect the cool, condensed moisture, and take a long, satisfying swig. Pure, life-giving hydration. Was it sweet? Did it have a subtle mineral tang? Did it, perhaps, come in different flavors, like desert berry dew, cactus blossom dew? Probably not. But, hey, a guy can dream, right? Imagine a world where dew is the new artisanal beverage. Oh, this is exquisite. A vintage 500 BC with notes of sand and camel breath. Okay, maybe not camel breath, but still. The possibilities are endless, almost as endless as the desert itself. And speaking of the desert, Zarathustra, true to his word, was already humming a melody, scribbling lyrics on a scrap of parchment. Something about camels, resilience, and the refreshing taste of, you guessed it, dew. I smiled, shaking my head. The world may be changing, empires may crumble, but some things, like a nomad's spirit and an old man's love of a good folk song, remain eternal. And that, I realized, was a source of resilience in itself. As the sun sets once more over the desert, painting the sand dunes in hues of orange and purple, I sit beside Darius. The fire crackles between us, casting dancing shadows that flicker across his face. He's much less orange now. For weeks, he's been sporting a particularly vibrant shade of tangerine thanks to some enthusiastic sunscreen application. But finally, blessedly, it's starting to fade. He points a finger towards the heavens, where countless stars are beginning to emerge. Each one, he says, his voice low and thoughtful, a distant sun. A reminder that even in darkness there is always light. He pauses, looking at me with a small smile. And a reminder that my sunscreen is biodegradable after all. We sit in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the soft whisper of the desert wind. It's a sound that seems to hold the weight of centuries, a timeless song of survival, resilience, and the enduring power of hope. Egypt may be conquered, its pharaohs deposed, its cities occupied, but its spirit, its essence that endures. It's carried on the wind, whispered in the shifting sands, etched into the faces of its people, which makes me think, a good bedtime story deserves a happy ending, right? Even if it's just a whisper for now, a promise of a new beginning. Darius nods, his gaze still fixed on the stars. There are always new stories to tell, he says, a quiet strength in his voice. Even when empires fall, hope remains. New chapters begin. New heroes rise. He turns to me, a mischievous glint in his eye. Which, incidentally, makes me incredibly grateful for viewers like you. You keep the story alive. You keep the embers burning. He winks, and I can't help but smile. It's true. History isn't just about dusty relics and crumbling ruins. It's about the stories we tell, the connections we make across time. It's about the shared human experience, the struggles, the triumphs, the enduring power of hope. And speaking of enduring, Egyptian culture. Conquered, yes. But extinguished? Not a chance. It persisted, it adapted, it thrived even under Persian rule. They kept their language, their beliefs, their customs. They even influenced the Persians in return. It's a testament to the strength and resilience of their civilization. They weren't just going to disappear because a new empire rolled into town. And here's a quirky little fact for you. Some nomadic tribes within Egypt were known for their incredible acrobatic skills. Seriously. Tumbling, juggling, contortionism. They were basically the desert's answer to a Cirque du Soleil troupe. Darius, naturally, decides he needs to demonstrate. He stands up, stretches dramatically, and attempts a handstand. It ends, predictably. Let's just say he has more enthusiasm than grace. He collapses in a heap, laughing. Okay, maybe not quite Olympic level, he admits, dusting himself off. But you get the idea. Which brings me to a point I've been pondering. Did these acrobatic skills ever come in handy during, say, desert warfare? I'm picturing it now. Darius dodging Persian arrows with a perfectly executed backflip. Leaping over charging chariots with a graceful cartwheel. Disarming an enemy soldier with a dazzling display of juggling. Okay, maybe not the juggling. But the backflips? Definitely. It's the kind of awesome visual that deserves its own epic movie scene. Now, I admit, there's no concrete evidence of acrobatic warfare tactics. But let's be honest. Wouldn't it be amazing if there were? Imagine the surprise on the faces of the Persian soldiers. They're expecting a straightforward battle, and suddenly they're facing an army of tumbling, flipping, gravity-defying warriors. It would be chaos. It would be glorious. And it would be uniquely Egyptian. I mean, think about the psychological advantage. Imagine trying to maintain military discipline while your opponent is doing a handstand on his shield. You'd be laughing too hard to fight. Of course, this is all pure speculation. But hey, history is full of surprises. And sometimes, a little imagination is all we need to keep the story alive. To find the whispers of hope, even in the most challenging of times. Just like the Egyptians, we can find our own ways to adapt, to resist, to endure. And maybe, just maybe, throw in a backflip or two along the way. Because who knows, it might just win the battle. The desert night deepens. Above, the stars blaze like diamonds scattered across a velvet cloth, infinite and breathtaking. A sense of peace, deep and settling, steals over me, the calmness of the desert's embrace finally wrapping around me like a comforting shawl. And, thankfully, Darius's potent aroma is finally fading into the desert night. The wind, no longer carrying his distinctive fragrance, feels clean and crisp against my skin. I breathe deeply, the dry desert air filling my lungs, each exhale releasing the last vestiges of tension. The silence, broken only by the soft rustle of the wind whispering through the dunes, is a balm to my weary soul. The sand, still warm from the day's sun, cradles my body. I close my eyes, letting the vastness of the sky, the stillness of the desert, seep into my very being. I think back to the Basari, their faces etched with the wisdom of generations, lived under this unforgiving sky. Their laughter, echoing across the dunes, a testament to their resilience, their ability to find joy even in a world that offered so little. They taught me so much in such a short time. The intricate dance of survival in this harsh landscape, the deep connection between humans and the natural world, the importance of community, of shared stories, of whispered hopes passed down through time. The desert's whisper softens, becomes a lullaby, a song of hope, resilience, and the enduring power of the human spirit. I hear it in the rustling of the wind through the dry grasses, in the soft sigh of the sand shifting beneath me, in the distant howl of a jackal claiming its territory. It's a song of survival, of adaptation, of finding strength in unexpected places. It's a song of the Basari, their voices woven into the very fabric of the desert, their stories etched onto the ancient rocks. I remember the elder woman, her eyes twinkling with the light of 1,000 stars, telling me stories of their ancestors, of their journeys across these vast, unforgiving lands. I remember the children, their faces alight with laughter as they chased each other across the dunes, their carefree spirits, a beacon of hope in this challenging world. I remember the men, their strong hands skilled in the ancient art of weaving, their voices joining in a harmonious chant as they worked. And I remember Darius. Even now, with his scent thankfully receding, I can still picture him, his flamboyant gestures, his pronouncements on beauty and the meticulous care of one's skin, his unique approach to desert survival. I smile, a genuine smile, despite everything. He may have been eccentric, but he was also kind in his own way. He offered me protection, albeit in the most unusual of circumstances. He shared his knowledge, however unconventional it might have been, and he reminded me, in his own peculiar way, that even in the harshest of environments, there is always room for Darius. Tomorrow, a new dawn will break over the desert. The sun, a fiery orb rising above the horizon, will paint the dunes in hues of gold and rose. The wind, carrying the scent of the desert after a cool night, will whisper new stories, stories of journeys yet to be taken, of challenges yet to be overcome, of hopes yet to be realized. The desert, vast and unforgiving, will continue to test the limits of human endurance, but it will also offer its unique gifts, the breathtaking beauty of its landscapes, the quiet wisdom of its silence, the enduring strength of its spirit. And somewhere, out there in the vast expanse of the world, Darius will undoubtedly be continuing his quest for the perfect complexion, leaving a trail of interesting skincare remedies in his wake. Tomorrow I will continue my own journey. I will carry with me the lessons I've learned from the Basari, the memories of their kindness, their resilience, their unwavering spirit. I will carry with me the echoes of the desert's lullaby, a reminder of the enduring power of hope in even the darkest of times. And I will carry with me the somewhat pungent memory of Darius, a reminder that even in the most unexpected places, one can find, let's just say, memorable encounters. Rest well, gentle listener, and dream of a world where even the smallest whisper can change the course of history. Dream of a world where the wisdom of ancient cultures is honored and preserved. Dream of a world where the beauty of the natural world is cherished and protected. Dream of a world where even Darius finds the perfect moisturizer. And as you ease back into the world, refreshed and ready to face whatever challenges lie ahead, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the story, if only to spread the word about Darius's unique approach to skincare. Just kidding. Mostly, because sometimes, even in the midst of hardship and uncertainty, a little laughter is the best medicine. And who knows, maybe somewhere out there, someone is desperately searching for the secret to eternal youth using fermented camel milk and crushed desert flowers. You never know. The desert, after all, is full of surprises.